Welcome back to another unforgettable Old West story from the 1800s. Set in the cold and unforgiving lands of frontier America, today's story follows a kind-hearted rancher who discovers two Apache women lost in the freezing wilderness with nowhere to go. Instead of turning them away, he opens his home and gives them the shelter they desperately need. But what begins as a simple act of kindness soon becomes a story of trust, survival, and an unexpected connection that changes lives forever. If you enjoy powerful historical stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Old West adventures. Now sit back and let's get started. The winter of 1883 brought an unusual cold across the wide plains of Arizona Territory. The land that was usually dry and dusty had turned pale. Under frost and thin layers of snow, rancher Samuel Carter spent most of his days alone, riding across his property, fixing fences, checking cattle, and preparing for the harsh season. Life on the frontier was never easy, and winter made every task harder. That afternoon, Samuel had ridden farther than usual. After hearing that part of his western, fence had collapsed during the night. Hours passed as he worked under grey skies. By the time he finished, the sun had already begun sinking behind the hills, and the temperature dropped quickly. Pulling his coat tighter, he turned his horse toward home. As he crossed a narrow trail near the riverbank, something caught his attention. Beneath a dead cottonwood tree sat two motionless figures. At first, Samuel thought they might be travelers resting, but as he moved closer, he realized something was wrong. The figures barely moved. Carefully stepping down from his horse, he approached and saw two Apache women wrapped in old blankets. Their faces showed exhaustion, and their hands were red from the cold. One appeared older and sat protectively beside the younger woman. They looked frightened and watched Samuel with caution, ready to leave if necessary. Samuel paused. He knew stories told in nearby towns about tensions and misunderstandings between settlers and Apache communities. But standing there in the freezing wind, those stories felt far away. What he saw now was not danger. It was two people trying to survive. He slowly placed his rifle across the saddle and reached for his water canteen. Without speaking much, he offered it forward. The older woman hesitated before taking it carefully and sharing it. Samuel then opened a small bag of bread and dried meat he carried for long rides. They accepted quietly. The wind grew colder, and Samuel knew they could not remain outside through the night. He pointed toward the distant lights of his ranch and gestured that they could come. After exchanging uncertain looks, the women slowly stood and followed him. When they reached the ranch, Samuel prepared a fire inside the main house and brought extra blankets and dry clothes. He gave them a warm meal and cleaned a small room beside the barn where they could rest privately. Neither side spoke much, but no words were needed. That night, while the cold winds moved across the empty plains outside, the two women finally rested under a safe roof, and Samuel quietly wondered what journey had brought them there. The next morning, sunlight slowly spread across the snowy fields surrounding Samuel's ranch. Smoke rose from the chimney, while the cold air remained sharp outside. Samuel woke early as usual and prepared coffee, biscuits, and a simple breakfast. He wondered whether the two women would stay or continue traveling once they had rested. When he stepped outside, he saw them already awake. The older woman stood near the barn watching the horizon, while the younger one carefully warmed her hands beside the fire. Their faces looked less tired than the night before, but they still carried signs of long days spent in the cold. Communication was difficult. Samuel knew no Apache language, and the women spoke very little English. Still, through simple words, hand movements, and patience, they slowly shared pieces of their story. During a winter journey with their group, a storm had separated them from the others. Snow and strong winds erased tracks and left them wandering for days. Their supplies disappeared quickly, and each day became harder than the last. Samuel listened quietly. He had spent enough years on the frontier to know how dangerous the land could become in winter. Getting lost in open country often meant never returning. He told them they could remain at the ranch until the weather improved. At first, they seemed uncertain about accepting help for so long, but Samuel insisted. Soon a routine formed. The older woman repaired torn blankets and clothing with careful hands. The younger woman helped carry water and prepare meals. Samuel handled the ranch work and sometimes returned to find small signs of care around the house: cleaned shelves, fresh bread, or firewood stacked neatly. Days passed into weeks. The silence between them became more comfortable. They shared simple meals and quiet evenings beside the fire. Though their lives had come from different worlds, respect slowly replaced caution. The ranch, once empty and lonely, felt warmer than it had in years. Then one clear spring morning, Samuel noticed riders approaching from the eastern hills. The two women saw them and immediately stood. As the riders came closer, Samuel understood. They had found the family searching for them. There were quiet reunions and emotional smiles. Before leaving, the older woman stepped forward and placed a small woven bracelet into Samuel's hand. She said a few words he did not understand, but her expression said enough. Samuel watched them ride across the open land until they disappeared into the distance. He looked at the bracelet in his hand and realized that shelter offered on a cold night had become something neither side would forget.